Namaste and welcome to the second season of Future Fit Corporates. My name is Bhavana Issar and I'm the founder CEO of Caregiver Saathi. In this season, we are going global and shifting the narrative. Caregiving is not a career obstacle or something that organizations must accommodate. It's a leadership accelerator. And through candid conversations with corporate leaders, consultants, and change makers, we explore how caregiving shapes resilience, empathy, and innovation. Let's discover what it truly takes to build workplaces that don't just include caregivers, but recognize that caregiving experience is an asset. Because the future of work is not just tech, female, or inclusive, it's compassionate, it's innovative, and therefore caregiver friendly. Welcome to Future Fit Corporates. Greetings of the day. I am delighted to have this yet another conversation under our series of Future Fit Corporates. And in this episode, I am particularly delighted to have with us someone who has been associated with the journey of Caregiver Saathi in so many ways. And also is, I know he will not like this, but has been an expert in organization dynamics for years now. I'm delighted to welcome K.S. Narendran. Welcome, Naren.
Thank you very much.
And as we begin, I'd like to, as always, give a brief about Future Fit Corporates. In today's dynamic corporate landscape, the success of an organization is definitely intricately tied to the well-being and satisfaction of its workforce. We thought of Future Fit Corporates as an initiative aimed at fostering workplaces of the future, workplaces that will hopefully be caregiver friendly, gender agnostic, and that will have a culture which is inclusive of all life stages for us who are associated with organizations and workplaces. In this initiative, we seek to facilitate meaningful conversations between CEOs, leaders, thought leaders, HR heads, consultants through video interviews, podcasts, and written responses. Our goal is to explore, discuss, and champion difficult conversations or edges that have hitherto not been explored in an attempt to integrate employee well-being with the very core fabric of corporate strategies. It is my absolute delight today to have with us K.S. Narendran, fondly called Naren, who is an organization consultant with over 20 years of experience working on people, culture, and change. Personally, to me, has been a mentor, a friend, and someone who has supported the journey of Caregiver Saathi over the last few years. His work is deeply influenced by Raghu Anant Narayanan and Ashok Malhotra, and he regularly uses their frameworks and tools in his consulting practice. Both of whom have been featured in this series of conversations. So how exciting is that? His interests span people assessment, individual and organizational change, personal growth, inclusion and diversity, and organizational culture. He works with leaders to diagnose entrenched patterns that block growth, facilitate dialogue, and enable collective direction and decision-making. As the co-founder and director of Reflexive Lenses Consulting, Naren is committed to advancing the Existential Universe Mapper, which is the EUM framework for individuals and organizations. He is a fellow of the Sumedha's Academy for Human Context, an organization where I met him first, also associated with the other media supporting people's movement and social environmental justice initiatives, a very passionate and articulate person who writes a regular blog that I often look forward to because it precipitates issues and ideas words that I may not have seen and is aptly called between the lines. Um, Welcome, Naren. What do you have to say?
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying thank you very much for once again being generous in describing who I am and what space I occupy in your life. So that's very kind. I also want to just add a couple of corrections, if I can offer. One is that the other media doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
So that association came to an end some time back. And perhaps I haven't updated you about it. I'm sorry. The other is my blog's called Lines About Times. So that's the only other change that I would like to suggest. Otherwise, all good. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Every conversation I've had with you has helped me to clarify some part of my own thinking and to uh, be able to put words to something that I may not have expressed thus far. So I'm hoping that this conversation will be something similar.
Yes, yes, for sure. I have gained a lot from our conversations, and I hope those who will join this conversation will be able to enjoy it as much as we do. Let's start with the idea of future fit corporates. Naren, what does that mean for you, and how do you frame the idea of future fit corporates?
Actually, it's we're starting off on a very difficult track, frankly. When I tried thinking about future fit corporates, I was asking myself, whose future and fit for what? And
Hmm.
I'm not sure I have a very clear answer at this point in time to both, because I think
Hmm.
um, uh, at one level, I think um, organizations are moving in fairly uncharted territory and adopting models that are not seen before. And so we still are in a phase of, I think, I would even call it flux right now. And in
Hmm.
this flux, to talk about what would constitute future fit is a little
Hmm.
hard for me to
Hmm. Hmm.
put words to. And to me, the things that I come back to are simply
Hmm.
this, that what you can do is to think of a future that you wish to create.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then put your best energies, your mind, your might, your resources, and the best of your intentions to
Hmm.
try and make it happen. All right. And and I think that includes, you know, taking into account the context in which this intention is being given a life. And if it means that it has to survive, then we have to ask ourselves what we give it, a fair shot at,
Hmm.
being around long enough, and and how does one nurture it? So, if I were to talk about therefore about future fit corporates, I think the key thing that I think uh, such corporates will require to cultivate or to sustain is a certain ability to be adaptable, flexible, and the words that we've seen and heard and read about, you know, ad nauseum number
Something.
of times.
Hmm.
The problem is that we are all prisoners of habit, prisoners of our own cultures, prisoners of our own past, and of our own
Hmm.
success, which typically come in the way of actually being able to make the departures that are necessary to create the new pathways that are absolutely critical, and to take the risks that may be called upon for you to take, because it's a cliche to say, we don't know the future, or to say that we create the future. But the point is that both mean a certain level of risk that you have to be willing to take, and a certain trust in your own thought, your own idea, your own vision, that you're willing to put your bucks on. So, so to me, the future fit corporates, I suppose, will be those that um, invest not just in capability, but in a certain commitment to deep visioning, a certain willingness to invest in their own intentions, and to be able to see how best they can create the guardrails necessary to survive and then to figure how best to thrive. And again, there's nothing new that I'm saying, but I think we just keep forgetting that these are some basics that we have to keep in mind.
Mm. So, there are of course multiple things in what you just said that I'd like to double click
And
on.
if I can just add to the mix, when I think of corporations like Palantir, or many of these corporations that are sort of looming large in the horizon, at one level, they seem very far away from where I am today. But they're actually right there,
In
perhaps
our daily
you and
lives.
me, listening to you and me, and figuring out, and somebody's figuring out using this information, you know,
Yeah.
happened to you and me. And this is a scary prospect. And I think, therefore, the idea of what kind of corporations will thrive, whose needs will be met, and what needs will become
Mm,
important, and important in whose eyes. All these questions become very critical, and I don't think we have a very clear answer to that yet. And to me, that bothers me at one level because if we don't answer it collectively in our own ways, there's somebody who's already making those choices and decisions and deciding to act on us,
or
right? Not for us, on us.
on us.
So that's one. The second, of course, is
Mm,
related to the fact of what we keep saying that how AI and some of the newer tools are completely weakening our capacity for critical thinking.
that's right.
And it's on a decline. And
That's right.
our own ability with respect to some basic skills, basic literacy, basic mathematics,
Mm,
basic thinking skills are taking a hit. And
yeah.
so again, what it suggests is that we may simply be swept away by a wave of uh, information products uh, and ways of living, ways of doing things, for which we're completely unprepared, and in which we may simply just not have the wherewithal to even swim. Forget about riding a wave. So I think
Mm,
it's a very uncertain time, and I think anybody who claims they know what it takes to be a future fit organization, I would have some serious doubts.
mm. So that to claim to be a future fit organization is perhaps the second part. The first part, of course, is like you said, what is a future fit corporation? Corporate or organization. What does it mean to be future fit, and why should any organization invest their energy in being future fit? Um, I think what would be useful is to unpack what you just said a little more. So let's say that you know we need to invest in shaping the future. Probably that's what we need to do, and then put all our energy behind uh, first imagining the future that we wish, and then putting the energy behind shaping it in that direction, because there will be forces and there will be distractions and there will be many things that will be happening, but where we put our energy is where the outcome will be. So if organizations or corporates or workplaces were to visualize a future in whatever the current times and the data that we have is, what do you think leaders could articulate?
Paul, I think they need to be able to articulate what's the future that they see emerging, and what is the space in that future that they wish to impact or occupy.
Right.
Yeah, and they need to also, as an add-on, or perhaps even precede that by saying how is it that they wish to impact the larger context other than just
Mm.
their own future. I think in the
Mm.
sense that they need to be able to make a clear statement about how they committed to the future of the planet, how they committed to the future of their context. Okay. And therefore, how is it that their work, their business, or whatever is their business, how is that, in a sense, a step in that direction of having a future to start with? I mean, somehow I think we assume that there is a future. And I think, given where we are today, we are in very perilous times. And I'm probably not so sanguine about the future at this time. And so it's hard for me to put a positive spin around the whole, or the gloss around the whole idea of leadership and how, they will create some rosy future, or how, for their own organizations or for the world at large, because I'm not seeing evidence of it. So I do wish for leaders and organizations to be able to talk about a future in which everybody has a place. What would that
Mm.
look like?
Who is everybody?
Everybody is not just shareholders and not just people who earn fat salaries and not just people who have, who have inherited wealth. And
Yeah.
everybody would include people who are disadvantaged. Everybody would include people who are not reached by the current policies and schemes of governments across the world simply because uh, they're the forgotten lot. So, and there are many across the world, not just in India. So,
Yeah.
so the point I'm making is that uh, go back to where I started from: future for whom and future
Mm.
for what, fit for what. And so
Mm.
I would like to see if there is
Mm.
for organizations and for leadership in organizations to be able to talk about a world first,
Mm.
which they believe is worth leaving behind for future generations, and how their work in
Mm.
leading organizations, their organizations that they wish to, you know, create a good concrete space for, how that organization, serves this purpose.
Mm.
And it seems somewhat a little esoteric perhaps, or idealistic, or abstract, but I don't see it as being very abstract. It's very real, because I think the consequences of not doing that stare you in the face. And so the effects of not doing that are palpable. So therefore, I think it makes good sense to, when we talk about future fit corporates, to keep in mind that while there is phenomenal wealth that's been created,
Especially recently.
at
Yeah.
the same time, there's phenomenal inequality, phenomenal
Mm.
poverty, and some very serious dangers that come from rivalries across corporations, across countries, that imperil the earth. And I think there's too much of a business as usual in which we can discuss future fit.
Mm.
I think I would imagine we are approaching closer to a crisis mode collectively. And I think that if we don't take cognizance of, I think we will live in our own little bubbles for as long as the bubbles last. And
Mm.
afterwards,
Yeah. Move from one bubble to another, perhaps.
like I say, आगे किसने देखा?
Right.
So yeah.
So in the same vein, okay, so let's just look at you and
I'm
your
sorry, let me
your point of
briefly
view.
in my response to what you're asking. Yeah.
Yeah, like whatever you have said is so big that I have to take it in parts.
Yeah.
So, how does Naren see the future of the world as of today? Let's just kind of give it some contours, some data, so that someone who's listening to this and probably is the first time looking at some of these things from your point of view is able to join us in this conversation. How do you see the future? We will come to future fit corporates. How, for whatever you have experienced, you have understood, what do you see happening?
I thought all the while I was talking about how I see the future.
You
So
do. You do. A
I was
little more
trying to think about a
contours.
little more differently, or perhaps communicate what's running in my head a little differently. All right. The way that I see the future, or I wish for a future, I mean, forget about what I see
Mhm.
in the future. If I talk about what I've seen in the future with nothing happening, then we already know where we are headed.
Yeah.
And I've talked about it in the last few minutes.
Yes.
Um, but if what I wish is that essentially you, me, every friend of ours, and every neighbor of ours, every buddy in our community or neighborhood, wherever, in every part, I think we simply just have to wake up and not shy away from asking hard questions to start with,
Mm. Give
and
an example of a hard question. Mm.
no, I'm not going to. There are far too many. I mean, as simple as this. I ask myself, what are the things that I'm indifferent to, and yet I bemoan? For example, traffic, absurd traffic, chaos, day after day.
Mm.
And it just matters that we reach home at some point in time. But would I join any collective effort to mitigate this issue? Often not. So there is a certain um, wish that the future will be imbued with all of us who are a lot more
Mm.
invested in asking the hard questions about what it is that we're doing that is not beneficial to ourselves to start with and to others. Okay.
Mm.
Um, Take organizations. How many of us actually use opportunities like our town halls or even discussions with our managers to question any policy? I think this
Mm.
idea, it's almost as if to question is to be subversive. And yet, if we don't, we have no voice. And, we don't exercise the voice that we are gifted with. And we have no, we surrender the option to shape things.
Mm.
So I'm thinking that in the future that I could live in and I would wish for is one where we start believing that we can shape things around us, whether it's within our
Mm.
homes, within our neighborhood, within our organization, in our department, within our teams, rather than accept the status quo, as a given.
We are more agentic than agentic AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a fair summary, I think. And so nobody else is going to do it for us. I have a feeling that if we think somebody else is doing it for us, we will be surprised to discover that people have helped themselves, not you and me. So a part of the future that I wish to see is one where we ask ourselves and others hard questions and don't shy away from engaging. See, it's one thing to raise questions, but also that if you don't engage, we don't discover something that you and I can move forward with. So, and there are many ways that we can do. Some do it by speaking, some do it by leading, some do it by cheerleading, some do it by writing, some do it by uh, acts of resistance. But the point I'm making is that we can choose what is our way to both be heard and in turn engage when somebody else is voicing something.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think there are ends or goals that are universal. In a what do you call it? In a transactional, in an existential reality, I don't think there are ideals and goals. There's only the fact of life and how can we make our lives a little better in whichever way we understand better. So, but one thing that we can agree on is that we don't want to, consume, pillage, grab, aggrandize to a point where there's nothing left, nothing of value left for future generations. And I think it may start at a very basic level, I think, of saying, in I'm buying something, I'm doing something, I'm asking something, who benefits, who pays the price. And we often think, oh, it's not just me who needs to pay the price. Somebody's paying a price. Who's paying the price? And can I at least ask that question? And is it really worth the while? So the future that I see whether I'm in the organizational context or whether I'm in my consulting context or whether I'm in my personal context, is one where we're able to connect what we're asked to do or we are doing or we're asking somebody else to do to something that benefits not just the immediate actors in that particular context, but also how it spills over
Yeah.
across,
Generations,
generations, time,
years.
space, whatever. And it may sound silly at one level because at the end of the day, you don't have all the time to keep pondering over things. But whenever you have the time, at least to take a step back and ask, I think you and I share a common mentor in Raghu who often used to tell us, I'm doing what I'm doing, what am I really doing?
What am I really
It's
doing?
an important question to keep coming back to.
For sure.
And if I can answer that question, I don't know how I can engage with the question of the future that I wish to create.
Hmm. Yeah, there is a very large population that doesn't think about beyond myself. And we are so caught with the everyday that taking a step back and saying that, I am following this trend, but in following this trend or maximizing for myself, what is it at the cost of? And what you're perhaps saying is that you wish for a future where more and more people are not just following a trend, not just thinking for only themselves, but thinking about those that may not have our privilege, and how is it that we can be a little more inclusive, not just of those who may not have the voice today, but also for our coming generations who we don't even have, a good view of the world that we are leaving them with. And the world that we are leaving the future generations with is not just the earth, the climate, of course, it is that, but it is also the quality of the mind, the quality of the relationships, and the quality of humanity uh, in general is what we are going to hand over to the coming generations. And it feels like it is important for you that leaders have the capacity to worry about something like this, invest their energy in something like this? Would that be a fair summary?
I think so. Maybe one of the things we could do is reverse, not just reverse.
Okay.
You ask the question, you answer it, and I will say, yes, I agree, 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 agree. Because you do a good job of articulating something that I've, gone all over the place to sort of come to, and I think it was very helpful.
But I just wanted to wrap it up
I
because
think, no, it does help. Now, I do see the value of what you've just done, which is to pick the pieces you know, from this canvas that, we were sort of together painting, and then to say, okay, these are now the broad elements that, you know, kind of grab our attention and,
right.
in a sense, pick another cornerstones of what is it that we're really talking about. And it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And then kind of take the next step further in this conversation and say, so yes, we do wish for articulating a future as we see it today, probably having more conversation, um, and then saying, okay, what is it that we are really creating? What is it, the price that we will end up paying for this? And you wish that more and more people invested their time and energy on it. So let's kind of take stock of what has been your experience of engaging with organizations, individuals, leaders. What are their preoccupations? Why are they not able to invest their time, energy, thinking on some of these questions?
Ah, if I think back, in most cases, it's never been a lack of intentions.
Yes.
Okay? It's a question of attention and where is
Mm.
the attention lavished on.
Mm.
And the intentions, I think, come as a justification later when there's a gap that is sought to be explained. All right. So, and so why isn't there enough attention? Is I think to me the logical next question. And I think many of the companies, at least that I have engaged with, I think the pressure to show performance, the pressure,
Mm.
the the yardsticks of success
Mm.
are fairly stiff,
Mm.
and it always seems like people that I've come across in organizations don't really have the time or the bandwidth to even uh, take a step back and look at, you know, is this a beautiful garden we are creating, or is this a monster that we have created, which is feeding on itself? So,
Yeah.
so so that's something one feels sad when deals with this, and also one feels for people who, as I said, with the best of intentions, still don't have the time and the wherewithal at that time to actually broad base their own interests and their own attention spans. So that's one, as I see it. The second, I think, is also, I think there's been a prevalent assumption for a pretty long time, and I don't think it's gone away altogether, that organizations primarily exist
Mm. Yeah.
as a vehicle of, performance, of
Big profits.
shareholder maximization,
Yeah.
and wealth creation for people who have invested. And so
That's
people as means
true.
to that end have been, I think, the dominant ways of looking.
Yeah.
And so to that extent, I I think that assumption has not gone away.
Not at all.
It's always it's either front and center, or at least they're certainly lurking in the corners and rearing its head whenever there is a little
Dilemma.
question, yeah, dilemma, right? So
Yeah.
that is yet another one, and I'm coming to believe that somewhere this whole business of thing of saying, let's make a business case for this or that. Actually, a lot of it is arithmetic, according to me. I'm
Yeah.
coming. frankly, if an organization has the heart to put its
Yeah.
energies and its resources behind something that it values, it will do it. It doesn't wait for a business case.
Hmm.
You know,
Conviction, heart.
yeah, correct,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's it.
So what it values, where its convictions lie, and where does its heart lie? Okay, and it will find a way. It will find a space. It will find the time, and it will let that flourish.
So there are two, three things here. One, of course, I think this assumption that corporates, especially, not all kinds of organizations, probably NGOs exist for a certain reason, corporates exist for a certain reason, and this assumption that organizations exist primarily to maximize profits for shareholders, investors, is a very prevalent idea. And what I hear you say is that that assumption merits questioning and discussing
Restatement.
and challenging. It's the key. And that kind of, because, when you hit a point of dilemma, this is the guiding principle that, the organization exists to maximize returns, and therefore we are doing what we are doing. Our heart actually lies elsewhere, but, we are bound by this guide or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Or then the argument being, oh, we are not a philanthropic organization. We are not a
Yeah,
charity. I mean,
you're not here for
very
charity.
easy to then, pose it and frame it as if it's an either or.
That's right.
State it in a way
That's
that
right.
one seems totally absurd and the other
Yeah.
as, the only way to look at it. And
Yeah.
I think that's not helpful.
That is true. And I've had some of the leaders talk about something like saying, we're in the business of being fair. We're not in the business of being kind, whatever that means. Uh, and to probably have some spaces where you can say that why not? I mean, so this means that going back to the idea of what is a workplace or what is an organization and what is the purpose of the organization is a worthwhile exercise. The second thing that I seem to pick up from what you just said was that we cannot be so caught with the trend or with the orientation for short-term gain that we forget that there is a balance or a counterpoint which might be equally important for the long term. So it is not just maximizing for the short term, but we do need to think about what we are doing for the long term and why we are doing what we are doing. So I may have lost my train of thought for the other point.
While you pick your brains a little bit on the thread that you lost, so just thinking that what you brought up about, we are in the business of being fair, not being kind. Uh,
Yeah,
Again, I like the clarity of that thought, but I wonder if behind that is also an assumption that we can't be both.
yeah,
And that is something I may wish to ask of this gentleman or this lady to examine.
yeah,
So that's interesting to me. For example, in Merchant of Venice,
yeah,
yeah, I think there was a whole tract about mercy, the quality of mercy,
yeah, yeah,
and it was, I think, in a court of law before a
yeah,
judge,
yeah,
and I think that won. The quality of mercy won.
yeah,
So anyway,
yeah. And and I mean, the thought may come back, but what I'm curious about exploring with you, therefore, is that because there is a greater premium on maximizing wealth and measure of success is what it is, there tend to be certain actions that are justified, and we seem to have shaped the willy-nilly shaped a future that seems more dooms than it is like we are headed towards a future that we want to head towards or that we want to shape. Um, I wanted to change tracks and talk about your experience as an individual, as someone who has been associated with organizations as an employee, as a leader. Also, you have intense experience as a person who's been a caregiver in these changing times. What do you think would be expectations from organizations? So organizations want this and they are headed to whatever that they are. Let's park that there. Now let's look at you as the individual and your experience of that.
Now, you asked me what has been my experience of organizations with respect to. No, can you just restate? I'm sorry,
Yes.
I lost the thread.
Sorry. Sorry about that. What I meant was, what has been your experience or engagement with organizations, and what are your expectations or experience as an employee of organizations? Like broadly, how have you seen that over the last few years? How have some of those things changed or not changed, given that you have a long span of time? And then we will come to the nuance of an employee as a caregiver later.
I think my expectations of organizations as an employee has been fairly clear. It's quite easy to state. One, I've always expected an employer that I've been a part of to be fair. The same word
Mm,
crops up again. To be fair and to be considerate, to take
mm,
into account circumstances. And there cannot be, in my mind, a kind of fairness that is blind to the context, to the circumstances. And so maybe justice is perhaps more important.
mm,
In a way, I think between a, an, a blind application of rules and say that, that's what ensures a certain uniformity of treatment and all of that, I think in theory sounds right. I think in my experience, that's not my expectations from organizations because it provides a baseline. It doesn't provide an aspiration. It doesn't provide a peak experience of an organization. So that's one. So kindness, justice, and considerate uh, outlook towards people is one, certainly. The second, I think, is one where I again used the word a little earlier, and I thought about it, and I think it's important. Is an organization that is kind. Okay. Again, kindness is contextual. It is person specific. It's contextual, but I think it creates the utilitarian view of kindness would be that it creates a lot of stickiness.
mhm,
Okay, particularly with word of mouth of
mhm,
of anecdotes of kindness and so on. It does create a
mhm,
certain positive uh, attachment to the system, and I think that
mhm,
helps. But that
mhm,
apart, I think simply as a human attribute of any organization, I think that's been important. The third, I think organizations, I would expect, would make demands.
mm,
Okay, and I've when I used to work, for example, and we used to take the company bus back home. At the end of the day, I would ask myself, has it been a worthwhile day? And worthwhile day hasn't meant that I had loads of coffee and you know, uh, you know, a cool
a
day.
good time.
Yeah, and so each of us will have our own yardsticks about what's a worthwhile day, and I think some bit of that will include a stretch of the mind, a certain challenge to what one thought, one felt, or one said, and some capacity to add value in some small way, depending upon where you are in the whole pecking order. Okay, But to me, these are critical things that I've expected of organizations, and I felt bored, and I haven't lasted long in systems that, you know, haven't had any of these,
Didn't
or
have
some
this.
of these.
Hmm.
The fourth thing that I would always expect from an organization is that I be dealt with a certain dignity. I will not put up with indignity. And that's fairly clear. And it's a very clear boundary.
Hmm.
And so, bottom line, I think a lot has, you know, depended on how I'm dealt with as an individual, how I'm challenged as a professional, and whether I've had an opportunity to contribute. And fourth, whether there was something that I learned about myself or about work or about the organization a little more than I knew a little before. If these are not met, I would feel I was wasting my time.
Yeah, they all seem to point to having a certain meaningful engagement, a certain quality of an exchange. And and I think that would it be fair to say that you can have this when you have an association or a relationship with your colleagues and the organization over a little period of time? And it's not just a transactional, like a short-term exchange or a gig assignment, the nature of your relationship with an organization changes with the period of engagement and the quality of people and the quality of relationships with people around you. So you were a part of an organization when the nature of organizations was very different. And now the nature of organizations and the quality of relationships, the transactional nature of organizations seems to be changing, so much so that the gig economy is the dominant economy. And that has an implication for workplaces, or what is the definition of a corporate, right? Would you like to explore the idea of what that means for people's expectations of organizations and what organizations' expectations of their workforce might be?
I think the whole notion of relationships between individuals and organizations, and what's the nature of the pact that exists between the
Mm,
individual and the organization, is again going through a tumult, I think. It's
that's right.
fair to say that
That's
there's a
right.
lot of tumult in this whole thing, and I
Yes.
don't think it is settled in any meaningful way. That's my
No.
first point. The second thing, I think, from an individual standpoint, I to see the gig is again spoken of as if it's a tsunami that's kind of smashed
Yes.
the whole corporate
Mm.
landscape. Yes and no. I mean, there are, it's become one more of those things that are coexisting with
The
traditional,
rest of the world.
older ways of engaging and connecting and managing. So I don't want to put too much of a
Okay.
emphasis on on some mega transformation that the gig economy has kind of wrought upon this corporate landscape.
Mm. Mm.
Having said that, I think in some ways things have become a lot more transactional.
Mhm.
With both sides, the basic equation being clarity of expectations and contract, and fulfillment as from the other end, and
Mm.
then things square up, and
You
we
know,
till we meet
move
again.
to the next. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of thing. And so the notion of an organization where one builds a career, as we used to in back
Mm.
in those days, or where we dropped anchor and said, this is where I am kind of going to experience my growth to my fullest extent, to my utmost potential and all that. I think those are ideas that are up in the air today, and they are not some things that people talk about either anymore.
Mm, mm,
Okay, so who provides continuity?
mm,
It gives the organization a certain form, a certain content, a certain culture, a certain
mm,
center.
mm,
And who are, the constellations around that
mm,
engage with this entity called the organization and keeps it afloat, keeps it alive, keeps it growing. And
mm,
it's become a fairly interesting thing to think about, because if everything is, dynamic,
mm,
what is the core? What's the center?
mm,
Or is there a form of organization and a form of corporate which is, a lot of loose, entities like in a galaxy, at its own pace, at its own speed, somewhere coming together and somewhere not coming together. I'm just trying to imagine what this whole thing means, because um, if organizations are essentially just going to be a contracting agency for gig workers, okay, then what does that mean in terms of an organizational definition, its own internal center? Becomes a very critical question. And if it is, and if it's if what's emerging are organizations that are primarily about still, you know, keeping the investor as the king, okay, and people as the means, and AI and technology being pitted against people from time to time in ever increasing ways, okay. What then is the kind of meaning that we assign to people in the organization? What of security? What of engagement? What of performance? What of growth? And how
mm.
do we distinguish where people are contributing and where is the interface with technology and AI that's kind of making the difference? So I don't quite know how this pans out at this time, but I can only think aloud, and I don't
Mm.
even know whether if I listen back to what I've just said, I'm not even sure it'll make sense to me.
So let's stay with the idea of what is the core of the organization, right? So earlier, or until some time ago, until when even I was actively with organizations, I would think that, there was this very popular statement of saying people join organizations and they leave managers.
Yeah.
Uh, and to some extent, we've said that the leader is at the center of holding the organization together. Again, reference to Raghu's business aligner model. The leader is at the center of the tensions that are held, and that kind of give this, whatever the purpose of this vehicle is, its reason to exist. And the leaders are at the center. So let's talk about the challenges and the careabouts that leaders need to make time for in this changing world as you see it. So there are lots of things happening. There is a callousness towards the environment, the climate. There is a dominance of wealth making in the short term. There is a use of people as instruments, as means of getting things done, not as human beings. Yeah. There is, of course, AI and ML, which is like the latest hot, shiny object, and many, many other things. Like, for example, the demographics are shifting. Women are doing different things than women did earlier. Hmm. There's a tension between what is masculine and feminine, and so on and so forth. What does it mean for the leader today and in the coming days, in your view?
I will hark back to an old idea.
Okay.
of organization fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And we started by talking about future fit corporates.
Mm-hmm.
I think somewhere maybe I'm coming back to the notion of fitness. But
Mm-hmm.
I think to me, the leader's primary role, or at least one of the key roles, is to continuously examine whether the organization, you know, is has a certain level of strategic fitness so that
Mm-hmm.
it is relevant to the future as is envisaged.
That's right.
That it survives in which, nobody's clairvoyant, nobody's just,
Nobody, yes.
uh, you know, so in whichever way that we are gleaning the future, are we building fitness in the system to,
That's right.
to whatever is emerging? And I think to me that's a very fundamental role.
Mm.
That includes looking at your people readiness fitness, your technology fitness, your financial muscle that you're building, etc., etc. So that's one. But I think
Mm-hmm.
we often say, that leadership is essentially bifocal, and I think one lens is around what's the fitness that I'm building, and I think the second I think is to look at saying, is my current delivery system in great shape, and where are the
Mm.
kinks, where are the wastes, where are the gaps,
Mm.
where are the wastages, and how do I plug these so that you know we have to be robust today.
Mm.
If you're not robust today, there's no
Lost.
tomorrow. There's no tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure.
So, uh, so I have to also park some of my attention to
Mm.
ask some good questions about what's the health of the system as it is. Is it robust enough? Is it delivering
Mm.
at peak levels? And
Mm.
so these two, I can't take my eyes off one or the other.
Mm.
So that's one. And I think, to my mind, the third thing that may have a bearing on being there in the future is the kind of culture that you create, the kind of
Mm.
culture that you foster, the
Mm.
kind of uh, values that you not just espouse, but actually translate into the things that you do through your policy, through your processes, through your engagement with people, and so on. And how is that creating a certain vibrancy in the system? How is that creating the kind of dialogue that's absolutely critical internally and with people outside? What's the How permeable is the boundary of the system to allow for fresh air to come in and for a meaningful exchange with the environment? How open is the system? How open is this culture to try new things? How receptive is it to ideas? How much of a willingness to listen and to dialogue that we see in the system? So the culture is, I think, to my mind, almost like um, an important ground on which to build both the fitness of the system for today and for tomorrow.
Mm.
And I don't think it's something that can be outsourced. And I don't think it's something that can be the only focus. It's again one of those things that one has to sort of figure out what are the leadership cues, signals that one sort of deploys to ensure that the culture remains vibrant. It remains in a way not stuck in the past. It remains relevant. It's creative. It it allows for people to thrive, and where fear is not something that is uh, coming in the way. And so one can
Mm.
talk about attributes of culture, but essentially the fact remains that leadership will have a very critical role. It has had and it will continue to have a very critical role in looking at what's the culture and how is it hindering or empowering the organization to move forward in a way that uh, it occupies the space that it wants to occupy in the future.
Mm. I was tempted to jump a few steps, but obviously I also have a blinkered vision. So I see, like I'm like the hammer that sees nails all around. I'm going to take a shot at this and say, what are the competencies or what are the skills or what are the abilities that allow you as a leader to work with this idea of a culture in an organization, given the pulls and pressures of short term, predominantly performance orientation, etc. In your view, which are the good leaders that are, and what helps them work on the culture of an organization with a steady, quality of energy and investment?
I don't know if I'm directly responding to your question, but I think two, three things come to mind. One,
Mhm.
I think it helps where a leader doesn't see himself as somebody who is traveling between two stations. All right. And you know, is willing to say, I'm here, at least psychologically, that I'm not here to show something and then showcase something and then move to the next.
Mhm.
And that creates that mindset is a very different mindset, and I don't think it has a great compatibility with the kind of culture that we talk about that creates a future. That's my personal view. So that's one. The second thing that comes to mind is um,
Mhm.
you have to believe, I think, that culture matters.
Mm.
If you ask for proof, prove to me that it is sweet before I put it in my mouth, it will not work. I think so. That's the other thing, and I think it's. I
Love
don't know if
the
it's a,
analogy.
I don't know if it's a mindset issue or
Mhm.
whether there aren't enough examples or stories that we are able to share,
Mm.
to make the point about how critical culture is. I mean, all the way from Venice down, people have talked about culture,
Mm.
how critical it is.
Mm.
But it's hard sometimes to convince somebody who is about, quarter se quarter tak, or, show me the bottom line, don't give me everything else is an excuse, kind of.
Yeah.
Now, with somebody like that, who is so driven by numbers, bottom lines, performance, um, a certain idea of success, which at one level seems very short term, and at another it's very extractive at the end of the day.
Mm.
I think with them arguing about culture is like it's going to go nowhere.
Mm.
So that's the other thing that I wanted to say. And so I talked about uh, the mindset. I think I don't know if we can call it a competency. I think you need to understand if you're a leader and you understand investment, you know that
Mm.
there is a payback time, there's a payback period, and there's a waiting period.
Mm.
And if you're not willing to wait, and if you're not willing to
Mm.
take time, this old story that
Mm.
I planted a seed and every second day I would pick it up to see whether it's growing. That's not how this works.
Mm.
But if you're a good leader, perhaps you would set out the markers of a certain culture. You would look for the signs and and signifiers of a culture that you're setting, and
Mm.
you would not and you would engage to see that it's not something where you sermonize and then you expect things to happen, but it's an active, dynamic, engaging process of shaping culture. And
Mm.
so, otherwise, you're otherwise it will be reduced to a good speech given from time to time, and a bit like the values
Mm.
written up on the wall. So
Mm.
that's the only thing that I can think of at this point in time. Specific competences, I'm not able to immediately come to you with
Mm.
a short,
That's okay.
long list.
That's okay. In your experience as a caregiver, what are some of the skills and mindset orientations you've been able to build that have enabled you, whichever way, to cope with the challenges? Or what has being a caregiver given you?
Oh, many things. One is a very direct personal understanding that a one shoe fits all will not work. That
Okay.
um, because because you're a caregiver, you're also subject to input from a variety of sources and anecdotes from what worked elsewhere and so on. And so you soon start sifting through to see what works for you and what doesn't. What's likely. My mother is the one who's principally the one who's at the receiving end of my caregiving or lack of it. So what will work with her and what will not. So that's one.
Mm.
The second thing I think is. Uh, I think kindness is important,
Mm.
and um, love is too big a word, and I'm not able to sort of connect with that so clearly and directly as much as I can talk about care and kindness.
Okay.
And I think it's simply about saying that you can never really feel the pain. You just have to accept that they are in pain.
Mm.
And uh, also, I think that there is so much that you can do. The means that you have can help, and sometimes make peace with things. And you must also know when to make peace with something. And I think
Mm.
that nobody can play God. I certainly
Mm.
cannot. I think that's a,
Mm.
uh, and no more wealth can, restore health unless there is
Mm.
a way about it. And
Mm.
so, at the end of the day, it also, I think it's a little bit about humility
Mm.
to seek help when needed and not try to, be a superhuman being thinking that you can manage it all. I'm learning that the hard way. I remember last week at some point, I simply told my sister, look, I'm just tired. I don't think I would have ever said that.
Mm.
So, uh, so I think seek help to let others do their bit in their effort to help rather than try and be very critical, judgmental, or cutting about, what they're doing or not doing. I mean, these are things that help. I think these are things that I've learned, as I've gone along, because I think each of us offer ourselves in particular ways, and there's no template for it. So,
Yeah.
um, right now, for instance, the last 2 days, I've got a attendant, so to speak, in the house. I mean, it's been a very um, unsettling experience, to say the least.
Mm.
And while I talked about how much resistant my mother was to an attendant, I discovered how resistant I was as I
Mm.
thought about it. My paranoia was sky high. My
Mm.
resistance was just beneath the surface, but simmering
Mm.
all the time.
Mm.
Until I had to say, okay, I think, I have to name this and I have to talk about it. So I think caregiving is very illuminating. It's a teacher. It illuminates. It teaches. It it's an ego buster also.
Mm.
So
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know whether I was responding to your question, but I just rambled on.
But I have to admit that I have a bias. So, as you listed, everything that caregiving has perhaps taught you or left you with or helped you improve on, repeatedly, I kept seeing reflection of what is required in a leader who doesn't know what future will look like, who can be gobsmacked by a new trend or a new happening that one has not accounted for. I see a lot of parallel
Yeah.
in what a caregiving experience kind of slowly but steadily but surely takes you through, both emotionally, intellectually, not both, but in all ways, emotionally, intellectually, physically, as well as perhaps what a leader is required to. So, I mean, you could accuse me of my bias of wanting to see that similarity, but for sure I see that similarity. And I personally do feel that, hmm, better leaders of the future or better leaders who are able to deal with the dynamics of the future have some commonality with those of us who have been caregivers. And that experience is valuable to bring in organizations.
Highly possible. I can't argue with that because I have no basis to argue
Hmm.
with that. But
Hmm.
it seems very possible that
Hmm.
a certain depth of experience that you bring from the household
Yeah.
cannot be separated. And instead, it can have a spillover effect into work, which makes
Yeah.
you perhaps a lot more tolerant, a
Yeah.
better listener. Um,
Hmm.
there's somebody who's willing to receive input and support
Yeah.
rather than, you know, keep all of that at a distance.
Yeah.
A certain humility that always helps, in
Yeah.
keeping the door open for others to walk in, and
Yeah.
I quite see the point that you're making.
Yeah. Um, and increasingly, given that just tangibly, like I really like that analogy that you said. Those leaders who want to be told that prove to me this is sweet before I put it in my mouth. Uh, I mean, what's the way of knowing that? Somebody else has to taste it for you and tell you, and you have to trust that person enough to believe what they are saying. Uh, it has all kinds of implications for leaders who are not willing to do their own thing themselves.
Yeah,
It
but
has been a, yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I don't want to cut your thought. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Please bring in
I'm
your,
just saying, any leader, if he has been sufficiently reflective of
hmm,
what brings out the best in him or her.
Mm.
Under what conditions have his colleagues together collectively turned out a great performance?
Yeah, good point.
And under what conditions has there been a certain ambience which was very productive, there was a certain vibrancy, there was a good feeling around things, and there was a certain camaraderie, a certain collective responsibility, one for all and all for one. I think
Mhm.
they would have, if they were sufficiently reflective and
Great
didn't
point.
think only their systems, processes, and measurements got all the results, they would not argue about culture.
That is true. Um, I think we can certainly have a follow-up conversation. I was definitely tempted by the point that you made as to what is really the core of an organization. One other thought that came to my mind at that time was perhaps the managers, leaders, I mean, different types of leaders in an organization and their ability to make a judgment, take a call that is beyond the rule book thus far, which is what will determine whether or not that manager or that leader or the organization is considerate to the new things that are coming up, because employees for sure look to be seen as individuals and not just a number or a skill or a capability. So for sure, that ability will come, that judgment will come from working with things that you don't know enough about. And among other things, I think caring for someone that you have no control on builds that muscle. uh, uh, I like the fact that although we are at time boundary or beyond a time boundary, we have explored a few things. We have probably opened a few ideas, and maybe we will come back for more. Any closing remarks of what this conversation has been for you, Nareen?
Yeah, I think it's been very valuable to me. I'll tell you in a couple of ways. One,
Mm.
um, it's put me back to a place where seemingly I'm saying a lot of things which I quite sometimes don't know where I'm headed. So
Mm.
that just tells me that there's much more thinking and reflection that perhaps is warranted for
Mhm.
myself and perhaps for who was listening. And so that's one. The second thing, I I I think I was very surprised when I saw one of the
Mm.
HBR articles that it
Mm.
spoke about the very thing that we had spoken in one of our telephonic conversations about
Mhm.
how at a time when people recognized the value of employees in organizations, and and how much their time matters and how much a distraction can take away from their productivity, they created childcare facilities.
Mm.
All right.
Mm.
Perhaps there is a similar argument to be made even
Mm.
for a very childcare, an elderly focused caregiver policy and amenities that
Yeah.
organizations must be open to investing in.
Yeah.
I think the same argument can be made that a productive
That's right.
workforce, okay, if it's taken care of by certain acts of what are broadly called welfare at a time, at some point in time,
Mm. Yeah.
can continue to be benefited significantly if it also had a welfare plank that focused on the caregivers in the organization who are also productive members of the system. And I
That's
thought
right.
I was pleasantly surprised to read about it, and I thought, hey, we did speak about it some time back, so that is good.
Mm.
All in all, thank you very much. I think this is a good conversation. Thank you. and look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you very much for your time. I particularly enjoyed, going through new areas that one doesn't typically explore. So thank you. Thank you for being your authentic self.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of Future Fit Corporates. If today's conversation resonated with you, don't let it end here. Join the Future Fit Corporates Club or the FFC Club. Explore our full dossier and discover powerful blogs from our past speakers. Let's move beyond inclusion as a buzzword. Let's make diverse experiences, especially experiences of caring for others, caregiving, a leadership strength. Together, we can truly build not just a caring world, but future fit workplaces. Until next time, take care and let's keep the conversation on.